Good morning, morning. Just going to wait. Just going to wait a minute or two for some more people to join. Thanks so much to those of you that have joined already. I hope that you all got your goodie bags. I know that some of you signed up over the weekend, so you might not have your goodie bags already. So they will be in the post on their way. I'll just give it one more minute. And actually, as I said, just before we started, I shouted down to my other half to bring me up a glass of water. He still hasn't brought it, so I might actually just grab it 1 second, if that's okay with everyone. Be 1 sec.
Clearly, there's been some very poor training going on in Marie's house. She's not a responsive partner.
Clearly not. He needs a bit more training.
His competencies are out of date by 6 weeks. He needs to go and get them redone.
He needs to do his mandatory training again. All right, I'll literally be 1 minute, because otherwise I think I'll be like blah, blah, blah.
That's the sort of thing I do. I ask my other half if he wants a cup of tea or coffee, and then I completely forget to make it.
Yeah. Well, my other half's got COVID at the moment, and I said to him, he's driving me mad. And I said to him the other day, "Do you want a cup of tea?" And he was like, "So I haven't asked you to make a cup of tea. I've asked you if you want one." I'm really sorry. I've just got, this COVID. I'm like, oh,
that's a no then.
The guy's got COVID. Who knew the guy's got COVID?
Oh,
so everybody who's just joined, we're just waiting for Marie to get her glass of water because her ill-trained husband has not brought it to her.
Oh dear. Made sure I came with mine.
Oh,
hello. Sorry about that. I'm back. And it is in a gin glass, but I promise it's just water. So yeah, Monday morning, as you do. So yeah, good morning everyone. So sorry about that. For those of you that don't know, we'll just do some very brief introductions. So yes, as I mentioned, you should have your goodie bag soon, and we're going to be here for the next 45 minutes or so, talking all about different challenges in midwifery that we face. We've had a little discussion. We all practice in different areas, so hopefully some of you either practice in the NHS, maybe you practice privately, and you'll find this really beneficial. We will allow 15 minutes at the end to do a little Q&A, so please feel free to ask us any questions or anything. And for those of you that don't know, so I've just sprinted up the stairs. For those of you that don't know, my name is Marie Louise. I'm also known online as the Modern Midwife. I am a published author. I am a mum myself to my little girl Georgie. And I also do a lot of work on Instagram, sharing evidence-based information and advice. And I also work with the wonderful brand that's sponsoring this, Active Iron, which we will talk a little bit more about later on. So before we kick off, ladies, would you mind introducing yourselves and telling us a little bit about your background and your specific areas of interest?
Who do you want to go first?
I'll go first, if you like. My name is Louise. I'm a midwife, otherwise known as the Honest Midwife. Just like these guys here, I have been published. I do a lot of work on Instagram, and my focus when I started sort of Let's Talk Birth and Baby, which is the business that sits behind the Honest Midwife, was that I just got so frustrated within the NHS, not particularly because of the NHS as such, but very much around what I see as a massive lack for women and their partners in the lead up to having their baby with relation to education. The education in my mind that was out there for them, I just feel that it's the only area that's sugar coated, really. So that was what I wanted to really address, was that let's just make it a little bit more evidence-based. Let's really talk to these new and expectant parents with honesty. So that's where I started 5 years ago. That's it.
Okay. I'm Marley. I live in the south of England. I've been a midwife since 2009, and I worked for the first 11 years within the NHS. And then a couple of years ago, I decided to work as an independent midwife. A lot of that decision was kind of made around not just the working environment, but my family as well, because I've got 5 children. So it just became increasingly difficult to kind of keep up with shifts and that kind of thing. So, yeah, so I went and decided to work privately. Yeah, I know, it's a lot, isn't it? It's a lot.
It's a lot.
So yeah, so I decided to work privately. So now what I do is I look after families antenatally and postnatally. I don't currently do intrapartum care, but a big part of what I do is educating parents about having a baby. So I lead a lot of antenatal classes. I do a lot of online stuff as well. I'm on social media quite a lot. So if you don't know, my handle's Midwife Marley. Also an author like Marie. So just doing lots of things really. And what I did notice actually is when I went to work, when I decided to work as an independent midwife, I probably didn't choose the right time actually, because I've been thinking about doing it for years. And it's quite a scary prospect, you know. You think, oh, can I do this? Am I ready for it? Am I good enough? And when I finally decided to bite the bullet and do it, it was about January or February 2020. And then literally within weeks, we went into lockdown. And I felt so much guilt because I thought, oh my gosh, now my colleagues are in the hospitals and they are completely, you know, run off their feet and wiped out. So there was a lot of guilt there, but I'd already left, you know, by that point and kind of moved forward. But yeah, so that's basically what I do. So work independently, but I do keep in touch with a lot of my NHS colleagues, and I think I'm quite au fait with the challenges that are going on at the moment within the NHS and maternity settings.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, actually you touched on it there, but a little bit about midwife life since COVID and like kind of how that's changed things. I think from my perspective, I have we're starting to see ladies now that have had a baby during COVID and they're having their second baby, or perhaps third, and I think as a result of that pregnancy during COVID and that birth experience during COVID, I'm speaking to a lot of ladies that are really sadly suffering kind of the aftermath of feeling a bit isolated, and even sometimes traumatized as a result of what happened to them during their birth, such as, you know, I've spoken to numerous ladies that have needed a lengthy induction. That induction process went on for several days. Then they had, for example, emergency C-section, and then they needed to stay in hospital for 7 days after. And in that time, they'd only seen their partners for, you know, a matter of hours at a time. And after the baby, one lady said she was with her baby for her partner for about 45 minutes after she had an emergency section. Then he went home and she didn't see him at all for 7 days, and she barely slept at all for that entire time, and really sadly ended up with really significant depression, trauma. And so, I mean, not to be really negative, but I think it's important that we talk about this, because we're now, as I say, we're now seeing those ladies coming through that have potentially had really difficult experiences throughout COVID. And I think part of that for me as a midwife is understanding that there is going to perhaps be a lot more work to do emotionally. I don't know if either of you have, because neither of you provide intrapartum care, so your ladies will go in the NHS to actually give birth. Have you had any experience of that at all, or any thoughts on that?
Well, I tell you what, one thing that I noticed, especially as we kind of went into the whole COVID era in the pandemic, was that literally, I mean, I've been on social media for a few years, since 2019, and occasionally, you know, I'd get the odd person sending me a message, you know, asking me for a second opinion on something or other, and I was happy to answer. Literally, I think was it March 23rd? I think it was March 23rd we went into lockdown. And in that first week, I got about, I think I counted them, around 300 DMs on Instagram from people who were just worried, were panicking, were saying that they couldn't get hold of their midwives, and I was sort of trying to say, well, look, the services are still open. They are still open 24/7. And they were saying, yes, but I'm struggling because no one's answering the phone. Or I had one lady even who she was, this was a couple of months later, and she was like 28 weeks pregnant, said she'd never seen a midwife. She had a booking appointment over the phone, and she went in for a blood test, and that was it. And she hadn't been.
Urine, BP, nothing.
No, she had a blood pressure done, a booking. She went in to have blood pressure done and some bloods taken, and that was it. And since then, so she was obviously worried. She was like, look, this isn't right, and I need to see somebody, like physically see somebody. So my inbox was full of a lot of women coming to me and sort of asking me, I've got this problem, that problem, is this right, is that right, is this normal, is it not? Because they just felt that they couldn't get in touch. And I did have to keep reminding them that the services were open, and it may take a little bit longer to kind of sit on the phone, but they were still there. So that was the key thing that I noted, obviously, is along with colleagues telling me, how difficult things were in practice. But I think there was a sense of panic at the time among new parents, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
I suppose from my point of view, very similar in terms of that 23rd of March was a key turning point for me. And I think there was quite a few midwives, you guys included, that had either already got their online packages or were able to say, look, there's this here. I took a slightly different route in that I very quickly established the live classes.
Yeah.
So I know there are a few people who do live classes, but mine, for whatever reason, seemed to be en masse. So I suddenly went from teaching 8 couples maybe in a nice pub with a plate of chips and that. I taught 70,000 people in the pandemic.
Wow.
And I'm continuing to teach them. So I suddenly found myself, I think after about 2 or 3 weeks when it sort of rumbled on, I was getting 600 classes in a Zoom, 600 couples or expectant parents in a Zoom call. And like you said, that feeling, that anxiety was like spilling through. But I think what I feel is that actually we all need to not necessarily pin this on the pandemic, because I think it's really easy for us to just say that all these problems are as a result of the pandemic. And what I feel is that they've actually just exacerbated a problem that was already there. And I think, like we were saying a little bit earlier before we came on here, I do feel that it is the only area of healthcare where we sugarcoat things for women. And I remember when I was getting together all my kit, the things that you show people in the classes, and actually asked a consultant in the hospital, could I have a set of forceps? And he was like, good God, you can't show a woman a set of forceps, you'll frighten the life out of her. And I just was like, that's so wrong. That is so wrong. This is so fundamental. And you ask most women heading into their labour and birth, what is the one thing they don't want in terms of their delivery? Most women would actually put a caesarean section behind forceps. Want to have a caesarean rather than a forceps delivery. And that's not necessarily wrong, but I think it is actually based on a lack of knowledge of what it's all about. How many women do you know that have said to you they don't want an epidural because they don't want needles left in their back? Whereas actually, because you go to a standard antenatal class, we don't really talk about epidural. We may say, if you want an epidural, this and this, but we don't say you need to sit in this position, you need to curl yourself over, you need to do this, you need to do that. Because in our NHS antenatal classes, to actually teach that, you have to walk away from what the guidance is and what the time gives you. So as midwives and all these lovely midwives or student midwives that are here listening to today, they are facing a lot of challenges on the labour ward for couples who are feeling out of depth, feeling really anxious, feeling like they're not giving informed consent. Because you can't, with the best will in the world, give informed consent for a forceps delivery when you are contracting 3 in 10 and you've got someone standing there saying you need a forceps delivery. If we spend time before they go into labour really explaining the rationale, how many women think that a forceps delivery or a ventouse delivery is doctor preference? They don't understand why we do one rather than the other. So if we actually were given the time to really teach these people and their partners. How horrific for partners to watch this, having been told birth is beautiful. And I think that is one of the key challenges, and it's been going on for years.
I tell you what, I remember, so my last role was as a community midwife. I was a community midwife for a few years, and there was never enough time. I mean, in terms of like antenatal education, I think one by one hospitals around the country, you know, were getting rid of the free antenatal classes. I know there are some places that still do it, but there are a lot that were saying that we need these midwives to be on the wards, you know, looking after the mums. We don't have provision for it. So often what I would get is I'd be seeing people in their third trimester, and at each appointment, which was only like 15 minutes long or something, which is just no time at all. It's barely enough time to test someone's urine, do a blood pressure and palpate them, you know, let alone actually sitting there. We say to the women, you know, talk to us about your birth plan at 36 weeks or whatever. There's never enough time to talk to anybody about their birth plan. So it's either your clinic runs over because you're talking to them, or they don't get enough information. So I would try and spend each week, each time that I saw them, chatting about a little bit, you know, for a few minutes, and then the next time I see them, chatting about something else. But the amount of people that I would see, especially if I went in to do a bank shift on labour ward or something like that, that just didn't have that information. You know, either they did go to classes, but because of the time constraints, they were so limited that they didn't get all the information, or the classes weren't available, or they just didn't know how to access any education at all. And then they don't know what their options are. So like you said, Louise, they can't make an informed choice properly when they're in labour, when it's something that they know nothing about. You know, it's really difficult, really challenging.
And I think it's challenging for midwives as well. And I think, I know you, Marie, had a really positive experience in using a doula. But as midwives, there's so many, you see these people on social media especially, talking about things and saying things in a really quite controversial way about consent. And I think so many people then end up really, it almost like pitches women against the people who are actually there and trained to support them. And I think you can get some really good doulas, but you can also get people out there. At the end of the day, we've got to acknowledge that to become a midwife or a doctor or obstetrician, you go through years and years of training. And so it's trying again to, I think that is another challenge that I've faced, is arguing with people about things that I've trained for years and years to learn and be qualified, with someone who's had a 3-day training course and is very nicely but fascinated with birth. And it's just so frustrating. And then you find yourself being really like narky and like really annoying.
I think there's a way that we can all work together, you know, somehow.
Yeah.
I don't know how that is, but I think that the more support women and families have, the better.
Yes.
And it would be great if we could all find a way that we could, you know, all work together properly. But people are all different, aren't they? You know, people have got different views and things. So.
And I think the key thing is like respecting each other's boundaries as professionals, and respecting kind of where your expertise begins and ends. And I mean, that goes for us as a multidisciplinary team. But I completely understand what Louise is saying, because I have actually faced that myself, where, you know, I've been challenged about something that has been quite difficult, because I think that there are occasions where women are taught that they have to not just advocate for themselves, which is obviously really important and something that I always, you know, keep shouting about all the time, informed decision. But I can completely understand what you're saying, Louise, because I had a situation like this, as I say, whereby I almost had to really work, and of course you should work to gain someone's trust, but I had to really work to gain this woman's trust, because it was almost like she thought that her and I were working against each other, and that she would have to just keep pushing back on me because I was going to do stuff to her that was unnecessary, because I'm a midwife and because I wear a uniform and because I'm part of, quote unquote, the establishment. And that was really difficult, like, you know, especially as a midwife that is very much woman centered. And, you know, I had a doula at my own birth, I had a home birth, like, you know, I am do my very best to advocate for women and support them to make informed decisions. But that was a particularly difficult situation, as I say, because I sort of felt like I had to unpick what she had been taught at a really difficult time when she was going into labour. So I'm trying to be her advocate, but I'm getting I can't trust you. And then I'm like, but you can trust me, I promise. And so it's this really funny dynamic. And I think that actually you raised such a valid point there, because now that we have the wonderful world of digital media, social media, there are lots of people that are able to share their opinions far and wide to hundreds and thousands of people. And never before in human history have we had this ability. So I think lots of people have opinions. Lots of people will talk about them in different ways. But I think that respecting each other's boundaries and working collaboratively is actually, is probably the best way forward. But in terms of implementation of that,
you make a really good point there about the fact that never before have we had the ability to get our opinions out to so many thousands of people. But what we're also now finding is that as a species, we're not actually designed to cope with the opinions of so many thousands of people. And as pregnant women and their partners, who are both very, very vulnerable, all of these opinions, I mean, there is a social media account, very colourful, a doula, and some of the things that are written on that account, I'm just like, I can't believe that this stuff is going out there. And you can almost see these sponges of women and their families soaking it all up. And there is that damage that I think, like you said, it's pitting them against us rather than everybody working together. I mean, I really admire you, Marie, in the fact that, when I saw you had your doula at your birth, I was like, gosh. Because you found a way to get, and you found someone who obviously does have those professional boundaries, and like you said, there's a way to work together. I am like someone that's so uptight about it that I know I struggle to open up to the concept of it, and I think that again is a challenge.
Yeah, it's a shame we're not like like over in the United States. Obviously, we've got the NHS here, which on one hand is fantastic that we've got free healthcare, but there's also a downside to it. And one of the downsides is when it comes to maternity care is that you're assigned a midwife. Now, well, maybe more than one midwife. And what we tend to forget is that we're all humans, and some people connect with others in a way that they wouldn't connect with somebody else, and people have got different personalities, and some people clash. Whereas, like in the United States, you get to choose your obstetrician or midwife if midwives are illegal in that particular state. You can actually interview them and say, well, actually, I want this person, I want this doula, I want this midwife because I like her, or I like her ethos, or whatever. I want this doctor. Whereas we can't do that over here. It's like, this is who you've got, this is who you're seeing. Yes, and of course, if you're pregnant and you clash with that person, or you don't feel that person is aligned with your way of thinking or your views, or helping you to achieve the birth that you want, then ultimately you can turn around and ask someone else. But it's a lot more difficult over here. We don't have that. I guess it's a generational thing as well, because you have midwives who were perhaps trained 50 years ago who may have different views to midwives who were trained 10 years ago, and I think it would be lovely if we were able to have this continuity of carer where you could actually choose who you want to look after during pregnancy, but we don't have that.
Do you not think, though, that, and this is probably quite controversial, that women do need to take some element of responsibility and acknowledge the challenges that our systems are facing as a whole? We don't live in an ideal world, and women will say to me, well, I want the cord to not be cut until it stopped clamping, or I want the golden hour, and all of these wonderful things. And I think to me it's about acknowledging, yes, we really understand why you want that, and in an ideal world we would do everything we can to facilitate it. But all three of us here know that the reality is, even when we were all doing full time on the wards or whatever, that if we can't assess your baby, or we can't do any suturing, or we can't clamp the cord, or we can't do all of these things that take such a lot longer in time, we can't transfer you to the postnatal ward. So the woman who is on the induction bay can't come round And she may, you know, those are the realities, aren't they, that we're working with. So I think, like I always say to women when they're talking about that, is with regards to the golden hour, there is absolutely no reason why your midwife cannot measure the baby, check the baby over, do the vitamin K, measure the head circumference, do all those checks, and then literally pick the baby up, put them on the scales and give them back to you. So separated for 30 seconds. Work together with that midwife rather than saying, no, you're not doing it for another hour, or, you know, all of those things. And I think it's trying to work together with what we've got.
And then again, it comes down to education, doesn't it? It's like taking, for example, optimal cord clamping, you know, and we all know that it's beneficial, and lots of mums want to have that. And it's down to us to say, yep, that's, you know, that's great. If you want to put it in your birth plan, that's great. 9 times out of 10, that can go ahead. Occasionally, there are some times when that we might not be able to facilitate that, i.e., you know, if the baby needs resuscitation or whatever, or there's some other indications where the baby needs to be, you know, separated quickly. But it's down to us to let people know that. But yeah, I totally get that. On one hand, women do need to take some form of responsibility, but then it's down to us to be able to give them the tools to do that.
I was contacted by a lady the other day who said, and I feel my heart breaks for her, she's been told she can't have a home birth because they can't facilitate it. They cannot, they just don't have 2 midwives to set. And I think to a certain degree, well, better to be told now than to be told on the day. They've said, look, we're not doing home births at the minute. And I see it from our side as midwives. It's like, I completely get it. And she was like, I think it's really unfair. And I'm like, it's not great, but it's making sure it's fair to everybody, because the reality is that one midwife is probably going to be sitting having a really nice shift, isn't she? Having a cup of tea. She'll be like, send me. So those are the challenges as well. I think, yeah, every side to understand all of these different challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's very much multifactorial, and there's a bit of a postcode lottery going on as well in different places. You know, there's different guidelines in different places. They're better staffed, they're better funded. You know, I've worked in various different hospitals around the UK and internationally, and in the UK alone, the variation when it comes to the services that are provided is really, you know, quite phenomenal. And when it comes to some of the challenges as well surrounding nutrition, I think recently, of course, the cost of living has gone up. There's various different things that impact people's choices in terms of diet. And also now I am mostly vegan myself. I do eat eggs. I started eating them when I was pregnant. And actually haven't been able to stop. Anyway, yeah, I do. Yeah, I do follow that diet. So there's a lot more people that now are kind of like having restricted diets, and also, of course, women that have babies that are quite close together as well, the impact that has on their body in terms of replenishing their nutrition and making sure that they get enough in their diet in between those pregnancies, or pre-pregnancy or during pregnancy. And of course, there's different supplementations that are available throughout pregnancy, and Active Iron provide an amazing supplementation that we're trying for a baby at the moment. Baby number 2, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you can't.
I'm not trying for a baby at the moment. I will never be trying for a baby, and I'm not getting more dogs.
Yeah. Marley, any more on 5, fancy 6?
No, I'm 41 now, and I've been having babies since I was 18, so no.
The only thing Marley and I are planning is a holiday without our kids. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. Going back to what you were saying about people who have like vegan or vegetarian diets. So when I first trained to be a midwife, you know, I would, which was years ago, I would say to people who were vegetarians or vegans, you know, you need to take iron supplements because the chances are you're not getting enough iron in your diet. And obviously things have, you know, research and evidence, things have changed, and you know, as the years go by, and I know that a lot of vegans do have, because of the diet, will have a lot more vitamin C in their diet, which does help the absorption of iron. But it's really important, isn't it? I mean, obviously you, Marie, you're a vegan, you say, but it's important that if you are deciding, if you are vegan or deciding you want to have, go down that road, that you understand what foods do contain iron, and if not, then absolutely an iron supplement is the way to go to avoid those levels crashing down in pregnancy, because we know that there's a lot of problems that can occur if your iron levels do drop down.
And of course, even women who aren't vegan, they're going to often be impacted. I was impacted, and my ferritin levels actually became really low as well. I really struggled to tolerate prescribed iron because it's given in such a bigger dose. And the more traditional ones years ago that were on the market made me feel a bit queasy. So I think it's understanding that there are more alternatives out there that are maybe a bit lower dose that will just boost you a little bit without those side effects.
Yes, exactly. And as you make a good point as well, Marley, about understanding, because I think quite a lot of people that I sometimes speak to, and they'll say, oh, you're vegan, what do you eat? And then I'll explain to them what I eat, what I take, and a lot of people don't always factor in, and especially when they become pregnant, maybe they've been vegan for like 5 years, they feel fine, and then they become pregnant and they don't necessarily think, okay, well, I really need to pay attention now to what I am taking. And sometimes they'll just take a general kind of supplement, and also not realize that if you don't keep on top of it, by the time that you sometimes get to 28 weeks, those iron levels can drop so significantly that you need that high dose ferrous sulfate, which we know 50% of women actually stop taking. And then, I see women frequently in maternal fetal assessment unit where we have to do FerroInject, which is obviously a more invasive procedure. And when I have those conversations with them, I often say, just out of interest, say to them, what is your diet like? What were your periods like pre-pregnancy? What's the difference between your pregnancies, if they've had them close together, if they have like IBS, and just sort of explore that history a little bit more with them. And more often than not, that could have actually been prevented earlier on through education, understanding, and also asking for ferritin levels to be checked earlier on. Because now it's becoming more nationally widely accepted that we have got a problem with non-compliance with iron, and actually more and more ladies are then receiving that iron therapy later on, which we would quite like to avoid. So a lot of hospital trusts now, and the trusts that I do bank in, they actually suggest that all women get a ferritin level checked to prevent this from happening, which I think is great. And then if they are kind of like borderline, then we give them that dietary advice, say to them to consider taking a supplementation. So I think that, understanding and that education, which I guess has been a common theme throughout this discussion, really, is that education and that pre-understanding is being so important.
I think as well as midwives, I don't know whether we've got any student midwives here, so if I'm preaching to the already very educated, please do say, but there is a big focus when you're a student and learning about iron. We all talk about iron, Nobody actually really touches, I don't remember hearing the word ferritin when I was training, and it was only when I was poorly myself, and the doctor said, your iron is your fridge. So when we as when we're making a meal for our family, the first place we go is our fridge. If the fridge is empty, we're like, oh shit, nothing in the fridge. We close the fridge and we then go to the larder. It's our backup store, and that's what our ferritin is. So if we only concentrate on the fridge, yes, we might be able to get a chicken breast out of the fridge, but if you've got no tomatoes or anything in the cupboard, your meal's a bit naff as well. So we always forget about ferritin, and it is so important because it is the foundation for our energy levels.
Yes, exactly. I love that analogy. I'm going to pinch that one. It's such a good way of describing it. Yeah.
It's really,
and also, I think there's a lot of people, some health professionals, not all, but some, and expectant parents who don't understand the impact of low iron levels and what can actually happen. It's not just obviously one of the risks is a PPH, but also we've got to consider things like preterm birth, stillbirth and other complications that can occur as a result of having low iron. When you consider around 40% of women during pregnancy will have low iron at some point, you know, it's actually quite a big big topic to
depression. If you've got low iron or ferritin levels, you're going to feel lousy, and you're trying to look after a baby. You're then going to feel you're not looking after your baby properly because you're so tired. You know, it is a vicious circle. It's so important that we feel as tip top as we can be as expectant new parents. It's really key.
Yeah, exactly. And also after birth as well, I just don't think this is necessarily discussed enough. Like, you might have a lady who hasn't had a PPH, but she's had a 400 ml blood loss, for example, and she's, you know, 5 foot, you know, a small lady. And we go, oh no, actually, you know, that's fine. We don't necessarily follow up and do bloods postnatally because she falls in the quote unquote normal category. And then she goes home, she's absolutely exhausted, sees her GP at 6 weeks, goes, I'm absolutely exhausted. And they go, oh, you're a new mum, you're not really sleeping, you're breastfeeding. And maybe if she pushes it, maybe they will do some bloods, and perhaps they'll find out that she is, for example, anemic, or, you know, potentially some other deficiencies. We know vitamin D as well is really important. But yeah, it's only then that we'll maybe actually capture that mum is anemic, and then a year later she might go on to have another baby, or 18 months later, and she's never actually, you know, got on top of that. So I think, you know, also if looking at it from a postpartum perspective as well, and there's lots of discussions around fetal surveillance, and you know, we have these brilliant supplements to take during pregnancy, but also encouraging women to continue on to take those supplements postnatally when you are slightly depleted, you are tired, maybe you are, you know, relying on those quick foods, those biscuits and chocolates and things. So I think it's, you know, looking at it from a real holistic perspective, and looking at after birth as well.
So Catherine has just said here, all down to the lack of importance given to women's health education generally from school agenda through late teenage years. It is so true, because the thing is that you look at what we teach children, we teach them right up to the point of birth, basically. We teach them about having sex, your periods, the kids all laugh in the back of the bloody class. We all go out, take the piss out of the teacher, and we carry on. And that's what we get taught. We never teach any of these children about the physiology of breastfeeding. We don't teach women. It infuriates me that we see these adverts for
even I know you're going to say
continence pads, and there's all these women aging from 35 to 70 almost saying it's normal. It's so not normal. Women are really failed in this, in the fact that they're not given education about their, you know, how many midwives, and I'm just as guilty, are you doing your pelvic floor exercises? So women then think that what they need is a really rigid pelvic floor for birth, and what they need is to be able to disengage their pelvic floor at the point of birth. They need to understand these muscles. And I personally don't believe that when they're 25 and pregnant is the right time to be teaching them. We should be getting our kids doing yoga and Pilates in school. Absolutely. And we are failing them abysmally. And it's us as midwives that are picking up the collateral damage of that, and are just like, how can I help? Because I don't even know my own pelvic floor and what it's about. I don't know.
Yeah, and also it's funny you should say that. I actually, I've written that pretty much what you just said. I've written in the introduction of my book, saying when I was at school, I would challenge my science teacher, because my science teacher would say, oh yeah, so where you get pregnant and the cells just multiply, and then, you know, then you have a baby. And I was like, you know, 14 years old, like, yeah, but how does that actually work? So what happens there? And I was always challenging them, going, no, but how does a human grow another human? And how do the fingernails know to be fingernails? And how do you know, really inquisitive. And I never, ever got the answers in detail. It was never satisfied. And that stands, as you say, for so much with regards to women's health in general, breastfeeding, pelvic floor, as you say, anatomy, physiology, you know, periods, understanding what's normal. I remember I had a lady who was bleeding. I checked her lochia after birth, and I was like, she'd lost, I don't know what was in her pad, but it looked like it was over 200 mils. And I said to her, you're bleeding quite heavily there. And she said, oh, you said to me that you know, to expect sort of like a little bit heavier than a period. She said, my periods are like this. I said, you bleed this heavy every month? And she said, yeah. And I was like, oh, I think, you know, we should maybe get looking into that, because that level of bleeding isn't actually normal. But that was normal for her, because no one had ever explained, well, you don't get taught that. That's what's normal. And your posts are great, Marley, when you say the postnatal, you know, bleeding and what to look out. It's fantastic, because it's educating women visually when they've never been exposed to that kind of education prior to that. So, yeah, anyway.
But we don't
really.
Another thing, we don't talk about nutrition enough, and its effect on the body, and obviously not just pregnancy, but just in general, you know. And its effect on the body. And in pregnancy, what do we do at booking? We say, oh, you know, don't eat this, eat that, don't eat this, you know. But we don't we have that one-off conversation, or sometimes, if we're lucky, if we have enough time, and then that's it, and then it's just left. We don't talk about it enough. But what you put in your body has such a big impact on your health.
Yeah,
you know, it really does.
As a species, if you think we are the only species on the planet that has a weight problem.
Yeah.
And only other species on the planet that has a weight problem is fed by humans.
Yeah.
And
it's all our fault.
Key. It is so key. That we're all confused. Nobody knows what we're supposed to be eating, because there's thousands of different theories. Do we eat protein? Do we eat this? Do we eat that? It's like, for God's sake, somebody that's clever, work out what's the right answer.
Yeah.
You know, it's so difficult.
Exactly. And someone's just said, actually, there's probably a whole class to be done on diet when you're a budget, especially during these times. And that's what I mentioned earlier. During these times, you know, cost of living has gone up tremendously, and it's all well and good saying eat a well-balanced diet. But first of all, what is a well-balanced diet, as we've established? And also that depends on culture. You know, so if you're speaking to women and we show them the classic pyramid that we see, that is not from the UK, or, you know, has moved over recently, and that's not part of their culture. They're looking at that going, what? Like, what? I don't know. I don't cook that food. I don't eat that food. So it's not necessarily relatable to them. And then also, if we're saying, eat a well-balanced diet with lots of colourful fruit and vegetables, you know, that's great. But can people, how much can people afford? Because it's quite expensive, and organic food is very expensive. So I guess as well, reminding women that are on a budget, or they have got financial difficulties, the support that is available to them, because we do have those food vouchers, the Healthy Start schemes and things like that. But I guess as midwives as well, just being very aware that the knowledge, the information that we're told is, you know, standardized, but it's not necessarily applicable to every single one of the ladies in the families that we see.
Yeah, like Tanya was saying here, people from ethnic minorities also eat differently. I would not have the first clue how to advise someone whose eating practices are completely different to themselves. It's like you, Marie, vegan, you may as well be Chinese. For all I couldn't make a sweet and sour meal any more than I could make a vegan meal. I would have no idea.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Advise you.
Yeah, that's it. And unless you look into it and really kind of like understand what your body needs as a result of removing that from your diet, then you wouldn't know. And exactly, it's applicable to all different ethnic backgrounds, cultural. So yeah. Any more questions? I pulled up the question bar a minute ago, but I didn't want to get to. We were having such a great conversation. I couldn't help but read it, so I quickly exited it. I've brought it back up now. So I think that you actually started looking at the question bar, Louisa, from Marsh, and so Summer said, as students, the briefest touch on ferritin from a theory point of view. I find that we are more reliant on amazing supervisors for expanding our knowledge in this area. I only really understood about ferritin stores in the wonderful world of community midwife supervisor. Yeah, exactly. And I guess, like, as students, if you are on here, speaking to your mentors about these kinds of things, because they will have such brilliant golden nuggets of information that you may or may not learn in university. And then again, like attending these kinds of events, looking at the appropriate qualified professionals on social media, you know, all of those can help to support you during that, during your degree in that educational process. So yeah, any more questions, anyone? And thanks so much for joining in. Like, lots of people have put some comments there in the chat box. But any more questions before we jump off? We're coming towards a natural end now, I think. how are you talking to women about elective sections in these unseen times? Who would like to? Oh, sorry, that didn't.
Ockenden. I was thinking, well done. She's dragged something out of that one, but I do remember now Ockenden times.
Oh my gosh, I don't know what my brain read there. Blimey, I'm so sorry. Georgie's been ill for 4 days and I haven't slept properly for 4 days, so I'm a little bit. Who would like to answer that?
Well, to be honest, I've actually only had one client who's asked me about that. I have quite a small caseload, and I've had one person who's basically just said to me, "Can I opt to have a cesarean section?" And that was it. So my response was, ultimately, the way you have your baby is up to you. You know, that it's up to you, but you would need to have an in-depth discussion about, you know, different forms of giving birth, different modes of birth. So vaginal birth, assisted birth, cesarean, to be able to make up an informed decision. And I'm not the one who would. I can talk to you about those different modes of births and the risks and benefits and whatever. But ultimately, to have a cesarean, you'd have to speak with an obstetrician at the hospital. And that is it, really. So I just kind of go through the risks and the benefits with them to try and get to the root of why somebody, you know, wants to go down that path. You know, is it her first baby? Has she had previous birth trauma? You know, what is the reason for her wanting that? I've actually got a client at the moment who is all geared up to have a vaginal birth. But at the beginning, she thought, she's 42, I think, but she thought that she would just have a cesarean because, and when I delved a bit deeper with her, the reason was because all of her friends have had traumatic births. So she thought the best thing to do was just have a cesarean because it saves all the problems. So over the last 7 months, we've been having more and more discussions about it. And she's like, Mine, I didn't know that. I didn't know that about vaginal birth. I didn't know this, didn't know that. And now she doesn't want to have a cesarean, but she understands that could be a possibility if, you know, if she needs to have an emergency cesarean. So it's about having that conversation, really. But ultimately, the decision needs to be made by the person giving birth.
I mean, I'm quite lucky, I think, in the fact that because my classes are live, I'm able to explore much more. And I've separated the labour and birth sections of my classes into straightforward, normal, natural, peppered in gas and air, induction of labour, epidural, forceps delivery, von Tooth delivery, and caesarean section. So that is 3 different parts of the classes. And in the caesarean section, we actually show them a full procedure and talk about the difference between an elective, what a Cat 1, Cat 2 is, what Cat 3, Cat 4 is, the recovery, and really spend, and the whole class is nearly 2 hours long. So we spend all that time in talking to them and like you said, Molly, exploring why. Now, I know Catherine here has said we've got an increasing trend of women declining induction and opting for a caesarean section birth. I, from a personal point of view, can really understand that, because when I was having my children, I had a really difficult time that ended in an elective the first time round. The second time round, my decision was, if I go into labour naturally, I will give it a go, but I would decline induction. And that was before I was a midwife. But I have to say, as a midwife now, if it was my first baby, knowing what I know with my physique and my, you know, me knowing me, I would still make that same decision. I would decline induction, although interestingly, I would be more inclined to go for an induction with a balloon catheter induction. And my thought process is, as like you said, as the years go by and we get new innovations, I would be more inclined to try Dilapan or a balloon catheter induction rather than Prostins, Pessary, all that sort of jazz. But it would still be in my head to decline it and opt for a caesarean. And I don't think that's necessarily a wrong thing. I don't think a vaginal birth is for everybody.
It's a whole new topic, isn't it? That's like a whole new webinar to discuss.
But
How many of us have been with women in labour that's on epidural and Synto, and you're sitting there thinking, I'm just going to get my hospital, I'm just going to get my scrubs on, because and I know you can't go down your whole gut feeling, but there are times when you just think, oh, this is going to theatre, and we know. So I think, like you said, it's a whole different topic, but it's a really interesting one that Catherine's brought up, that women are very frightened about the quality of care. And it's the first time in my career that I've heard we've always said, haven't we, that postnatal care is a bit crap. We know that, but I've never lived through a time where my colleagues are saying they feel that interpartum care is becoming unsafe in certain places.
Yeah, and it is scary and worrying, and I suppose as midwives, working in that environment can be very, very stressful, and something that I say to new mums is the nurturer needs to be nurtured. And we've spoken a lot about how mums need to look after themselves and nutrition during pregnancy, looking at anemia, looking at postnatal looking after yourself, but actually it goes for us midwives as well. We're nurturers, and we also need to be nurtured. So working in that kind of stressful environment can be really difficult. And I know there are some other midwives on Instagram, the holistic midwife, that talks a lot about this, about working conditions. So again, I think that is probably a whole other webinar to talk about. But as we're coming towards the end, I just wanted to say massive thank you to everybody that has joined. And as mentioned, this webinar is sponsored by Active Iron. Oh, I don't know if you can quite see it there. It keeps going in and out. It's sponsored by Active Iron, and this is their Pregnancy Plus. So this is we've just discussed on the webinar about nutrition in pregnancy, about identifying those risk factors. So a very brief recap: those risk factors are often those that follow vegetarian or vegan diets, which are increasing in trends, ladies that have had pregnancies very close together, ladies that have twin pregnancies, heavy menstrual cycle or periods, and any kind of issues such as IBFs. Those are, some of the main risk factors, to name a few. But the reason that I work with Active Iron and that I love the brand is that there is clinical data that actually supports their claims, and it is absorbed better. There's 6 times less gut irritation when studied, and I think that is really, really important factor for women and for us to know as midwives as well, is because those GI side effects are one of the reasons that causes the non-compliance. If you don't want to get constipation or nausea in pregnancy, you've already been there if it was first trimester, and if you're still there, you certainly don't want to exacerbate your symptoms. So there is clinical evidence and data to support that. And also to support that there's 4 times more compliance in ladies that do take Active Iron. And the Pregnancy Plus is a complete nutritional solution for both mum and baby. It's got 21 ingredients in it, and covers you for everything. So that's one of the reasons why I'm taking it at the moment, as we're trying. So getting
the vitamin C is great as well, because that then helps the absorption process, doesn't it? So I know Active Iron have vitamin C in their supplements, which is very helpful.
Yeah, exactly, and that does help with the absorption. So as I mentioned, it's 2 times better absorbed. So yes, so that's great. And last point I just want to make is they do have a fantastic CPD module to take, and you can take that, print it out, and put it in your portfolio, as I often do when it comes around for revalidation, so you've got it all there ready and organized. And I've just popped the link in the chat for everybody there, so to make it easy for you, if you want to click that now, then you can go off and take the CPD module as and when you like.
That's free, isn't it? It's free, isn't it? That
yes, it's free as well. Sorry, I should have mentioned. Great point, Miley. Yes, it is free. Yeah,
cool. I might do that myself.
Yeah, go for it.
Mine's coming up. I got a reminder. I got this thing. Your validation is due, and you're like, is it?
Yeah.
And it's like, your validation is due in 12 months. It's like, okay.
Got a year.
And I was like, okay, as if to say, right, I'll get on that. And I know that in 12 months' time, I'm going to get that same email that says your validation is due tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll do that.
You've got a link to support you there for the time being. Remove a layer of anxiety.
Yes, very much.
All right, brilliant.
Been a great chat.
Yeah, lovely to chat. And thanks so much, everyone, for joining again. Have a lovely rest of your day.
Yes, and you take care, everybody.
Bye. Bye.